Hi, Mary here, and this is a presentation on arthritis and multiple sclerosis, which are both considered neuromuscular diseases. And I called this slowly but surely because both diseases do happen over time, but they both can be quite detrimental. So before we dive in, I just want to preface this by understanding what a neuromuscular disease is, and understandably, it is one that affects your nerves and your muscles, which often causes muscle weakness, pain, and decreased range of motion. So, arthritis is the inflammation of joints, and I'm sure we have known somebody who has had arthritis, whether that's a family member or not, but it's quite common. And actually, there are various forms of arthritis, but the two that are most common we'll talk about here today, which are osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. Osteoarthritis occurs when cartilage breaks down, causing bone to grind against each other. This type typically occurs from wear and tear over time. And if you look at that second photo there, you'll notice the bone-to-bone contact, and that is osteoarthritis. So when we compare that to the one on the left, if you notice on the left in between the bones, you have a nice black line in between them, and that is where the cartilage lives. And then, of course, on the right side, we don't see that line as distinctly, which means there's obviously a lot less cartilage. So rheumatoid arthritis, on the other hand, is an autoimmune disease that attacks the joint capsules. The capsule encloses all joint parts, and this synovial membrane becomes inflamed and swells and may actually destroy the cartilage and bone within the joint. Now, if you notice on the right side, the last photo there, the bone deterioration. And throughout this presentation, I will refer to osteoarthritis as OA and rheumatoid arthritis as RA, just to differentiate. Now, I used to work at a retired living center, and I knew of a woman who had hands that looked like the ones on the right side. And at the time, I was 16 and didn't really know what that was, but even just further research into this, it's something that's come to my attention as to what that was, and it's kind of sad because it's obviously quite painful. So on actually a lighter note, a question for you, which is, which redheaded TV icon had RA since she was 17? More on that later. So similar to RA, multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease where the immune system attacks its own myelin sheaths, which causes nerve deterioration. And in this presentation, I'll refer to multiple sclerosis as MS, just to kind of make it simple for us. So when we look at the two, when we look at MS and arthritis, we notice some similarities. So let's compare the two. In time, multiple sclerosis and arthritis both decrease one's ability to move, and this can make activities considered simple at one point, like walking or getting dressed, a challenge. And common symptoms of these neuromuscular diseases are tingling in the limbs, weakness, and pain overall. Now, the exact cause of MS and RA aren't exactly known, but studies discovered that genetics do in fact play a role, and also women tend to be more affected than men, which is quite interesting. Again, we're not exactly sure why that happens, but it's happening, and we're all curious about it. So on the other hand, let's contrast. So MS and arthritis tends to accumulate pain in different weather conditions, which is quite interesting. MS patients typically feel more symptomatic with temperatures that increase, while on the other hand, symptoms occur more with arthritic patients when weather and temperature overall decreases. Also, too, MS attacks nerve cells in the central nervous system, which affects one's ability to remember, actually, and to see. So that's why we have vision loss on the left side. But that actually doesn't happen very much in arthritis patients because, remember, we talked about how the disease attacks mainly the joints there. So other factors that play into the causes of both, especially MS here, is if you live in a temperate climate, which is quite interesting, if you're Caucasian, prior infection, and smoking influences, so even like secondhand smoke, and if you were a smoker yourself, and in arthritis, age, obesity, and prior joint injury influences also influence that as well. So again, similar yet quite different. So when we look at the science behind this, behind the Mediterranean diet's influence on MS, it shows potential to lower the burden of something called WMHV in patients. And what that stands for is white matter hyperintestinitis, which is a mouthful, but that also is, what that means really is chronic small vessel damage in the brain. And this cross-sectional analysis suggests, though, that there should be more research for the Mediterranean diet's relationship with neurodegradation in places beyond the brain. Now, when we look at arthritis, specifically osteoarthritis, we look at a 2017 case-controlled study that observed 99 patients with OA for 16 weeks and had them follow a Mediterranean diet. Now, all biomarkers except for one was unchanged after the 16 weeks, and ideally we would have them change. So therefore, again, similar to the last study, we do need further research before concluding that the Mediterranean diet has any long-term effects on OA. And another 2017 study, it's actually a systematic review of 4 studies, showed that only one of them found patients with rheumatoid arthritis had decreased pain and increased physical functions when adopting a Mediterranean diet. Researchers believe, that diet does reduce inflammation in arthritic patients, specifically the Mediterranean diet. However, again, further research is needed. So question for you, what kinds of food in the Mediterranean diet may influence inflammation and specifically reduce? So as we've learned from class, some staple items from the Mediterranean diet include whole grains and oils, especially olive oils, a ton of produce, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds and legumes and beans, and that kind of rhymed, and I didn't intend for it to rhyme. A little bit of wine, a lot of water, and of course some herbs and spices. And this is obviously quite different than the standard American diet that we live out in America, which is rich in saturated fat, added salt, and added sugar. So by adopting a Mediterranean diet, beyond these 2 diseases, we find that it's quite helpful for your body overall. So when we look into an anti-inflammatory diet, which would also likely help benefit people with OA, RA, or MS, we like to steer clear from processed foods like refined grains, SSBs, which are sugar-sweetened beverages, red meat like hot dogs and sausage, and margarine and shortening and lard, and overall everything on the left side of the screen is rather processed. So an anti-inflammatory diet is rather pure if you look on the right. So we would promote things like tomatoes and olive oil and leafy greens and nuts and seeds, and those are all really elements of the Mediterranean diet. Now, the fruit part, that is part of the diet as well, but what's listed there are some suggestions specifically for the anti-inflammatory diet. Now, those fruits may vary if you are adopting a Mediterranean diet specifically, but of course fruit in general is quite good. So overall, integrating elements of the diet may not exactly prevent or drastically reduce symptoms of OA or RA or even MS, but they promote a reduction in inflammation and overall a healthful diet. So thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we can adopt some of these methods too, even if we don't particularly have OA, RA, or MS. And also, too, to answer that last question you might have lingering of which celebrity might have had RA when she was a teen, it was Lucille Ball.